It is now the battle of the experts, and Reddington did not come to play. Day 18 of Lindsay Clancy's trial has wrapped up. It's a great day for a great day. My name is Sydney Rushing. I'm a criminal defense attorney in the state of Michigan. Now let's talk about it. Witness number 10, and the last defense witness was called to the stand. He is witness number 81 overall, Dr. Philip Resnick. Now he's a forensic psychiatrist, and the morning did start off a little rough because he was having some technical difficulties with his sound lagging, his voice coming through at the same time, so they had to correct that before he could continue. And once it was all cleared up, they got into it. During the course of his career, he has evaluated about 80 patients who have unalived their children, and he's also consulted on the Jeffrey Dahmer, the Unabomber, Casey Anthony, which, by the way, how is her return to social media going for her? And Andrea Yates. He spent 3 hours interviewing Lindsay, who was fully medicated and cooperative, and also spent 2 hours interviewing her parents. He described Lindsay as being a matter of fact, but grieving the loss of her 3 kids. Nurses told him that she was crying daily about the loss of the children. He said that her emotions during the interview were not what you would expect. She had like a blunted effect. Her feeling tone was muted. He went through Lindsay's medical records. His report is from September of 2023, but the doctors retained by the prosecutors did not meet with Lindsay until about 3 years after the incident. Reddington pointed out that one of the prosecutors' doctor administered the Minnesota multi-phase personality inventory test to see if Lindsay was faking her symptoms. He said the results show that Lindsay had a tendency to minimize and did not have a tendency to exaggerate what she was saying about her symptoms. So basically, there was no evidence of faking any symptoms. Leading up to the incident, Lindsay had 7 of the 9 symptoms for major depression, and she was severely depressed. She had earlier evidence of mild mania, and that fits type 2 bipolar disorder, where there is more severe depression and the manic aspects are not as severe. His diagnosis was bipolar 2 disorder with severe depression. He said that Lindsay met the definition of a major depression as well as this bipolar phenomenon. Because the symptoms started within 3 months of Callan's birth, it's considered postpartum onset. On the day of the incident, he said that Lindsay was frankly psychotic. He also said that she had a postpartum psychosis. It's actually not frequent to have postpartum psychosis 8 months after a birth, but it does occasionally occur. Whether it's classic postpartum psychosis or not, when paired with postpartum onset and frank psychosis on the day of the incident, he would label it as postpartum psychosis. He said that Lindsay did her best to not reveal the extent of her depression. She was more clear with family members, but when it came to like friends and casual friends, she didn't really give the extent of it. On the day of the incident, she was able to function throughout the day until she heard a command hallucination while Patrick was out running errands. He described as some command hallucinations being less severe, like open a window or get a glass of water. And then there are more dangerous ones involving hurting yourself or others. He said on the day of the incident, Lindsay had not only a command hallucination, but that she also had a delusion of influence. He said not only did she hear a command, but she felt that her body was taken over by an external force where she was in a dream state and did not have control of her own body. It was almost like she was a puppet and somebody else was pulling the strings. There was a sidebar over this comment, and the judge told the jury they're not to consider any statements by Lindsay given to a psychiatrist as establishing the truth of any facts that are contained within those statements. He said that because of her mental disease, Lindsay was unable to conduct herself within the requirements of the law at the time of the incident. So now we've heard that twice. She felt that she had to follow the instructions she heard. It was a matter of where she was just following a command rather than being able to make any decision to do it or not. He discussed the 5 categories he has for mothers who unalive their children. He placed Lindsay in the altruistic filicide category, which is where you unalive your child out of love rather than hostility, where their mother plans to take her own life and she believes that the child will be worse off without her there alive and parenting her. He said that Lindsay believes she would be doing her children a favor by having them go to heaven with her rather than remain on earth without her doing the mothering, saying her mind was very distorted like that. On cross-examination, he confirmed that most mothers who unalive their children don't do it because of mental illness. Prosecutor said Andrea Yates checked herself into a hospital 5 times and tried to unalive herself 2 times before she unalived her 5 kids, and he said that Lindsay tried to avoid harming her kids as well. When pressed that Lindsay did not tell her provider of the thoughts of harming the kids, he said that's normal because women fear their children will be taken away from them. There was no redirect, and after 10 witnesses, the defense closed their case, and now the prosecutors are coming back with their rebuttal. Rebuttal witness number 1, or number 82 overall, is Dr. Avram Mack. He is a psychiatrist. He conducted an evaluation of Lindsay on April 10th and April 12th of 2026. Not 2023, 2026. He said he was evaluating criminal responsibility, and in Massachusetts, they have to look at a person's condition and conduct at the time of the events, even though they are gathering information after the fact. He looked through her medical records and other reports. He described Lindsay as being friendly and cooperative. She exhibited some distress during some topics, even tearful at one point, but otherwise noting nothing remarkable. He said she described being depressed, miserable, and not wanting to live, and at the time she was prescribed several medications. He said she wasn't convinced that she had bipolar disorder, but that she had situational depression, remorse about the incident, separation from Patrick and the world, and her physical injury. He discussed Lindsay's meds during the time leading up to the incident. He said that Lindsay suffered a major depressive disorder in 2022 and 2023. He said there was never any indication that she had mania. He described mania as a mood state where over a course of 7 days, a person has at least 4 of the following: distractibility, aka the flight of ideas; 2, grandiosity, excessive goal-directed behavior, or pressured speech, or reduced need for sleep, or engaging in activities that could have painful consequences. He said he did not see any signs that Lindsay had psychosis. He said those suffering from psychosis can act normally, the same with hallucinations. He said there is no reason a person with psychosis wouldn't know right from wrong. He considered whether Lindsay had bipolar disorder, but there was no mania for that to be a possibility. Being in the mood to unalive yourself is not a form of psychosis. He said since she was feeling like unaliving herself, it showed she was suffering and that it was part of a major depressive episode. In his opinion, Lindsay retained the ability to conform her behavior with the law and appreciate the wrongfulness of her actions, saying that she acted normally and lawfully during the time leading up to the incident itself. He also indicated that her being horrified shows the feeling of shame that comes from being horrified, and that indicates she was aware that it had been wrong thing to do. But that's after the fact, not during, but I digress. He said that auditory hallucinations can be sporadic or consistent. She reported hearing a voice in the late afternoon. It was loud and told her that this was the last chance she could unalive herself. He said she explained how she did it. She took Dawson downstairs, wrapped the exercise band around his neck, and said out loud, "Go to God," and she was saying the same thing to Cora. He said that the sentiment, "go to God," is a way to express that her children were innocent while what she was doing was not innocent. I don't see the correlation there. She then took medications, sliced herself, and then caused herself to fall out the window. She denied locking the door, which was inconsistent with what Patrick had said, and described cutting the window screen, which he also said was inconsistent with the evidence so far. On cross-examination, Reddington pointed out that he only learned about Lindsay's background through herself, not through investigating her background, to which he acknowledged not interviewing any other sources during his investigation. He said that running a 5K shortly after having Callan was not hypomanic. Reddington pointed out that basically the prosecutors reached out to him pretty much right when the defense filed their notice of lack of responsibility. He said that he works for Park Dietz, an associate, and Park Dietz is a famous psychiatrist who has testified in many cases. He agreed that when they are asked to look into the lack of criminal responsibility of an individual charged with a crime, that they're supposed to be independent. And then he said that he thinks it's appropriate for 2 separate consultants from the same company who both interviewed Lindsay at the same time are now both testifying to the same thing on the prosecutor's side in their rebuttal. He thinks that that's appropriate. I don't think that that's independent. That is the defense attorney in me saying that. Then Reddington pointed out that most of his work is in pediatric and adolescents. He said, your interest is in adolescents that like to smoke weed and drink, right? And he said no, though his lecture and research publications suggest otherwise. He said that he's treated approximately 10 women with postpartum psychosis. He was pressed about saying that Lindsay exhibited lifelong resistance to taking meds. He said this stemmed from her saying that she didn't want to take meds and that instead of taking meds after Dawson, she got through anxiety with exercise, to which Reddington said that Lindsay never told him that she resisted medication in childhood and adolescence and was asked basically, why are you making this stuff up? To which the prosecution objected and the judge sustained the objection. And they started going back and forth about the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, aka the DSM-5, to which postpartum psychosis appears in a page on the manual titled Sex and Gender-Related Diagnostic Issues. Reddington pointed out that the International Disease Classification has a period of postpartum risk for psychosis as 12 months, where the DSM-5 only has it for 4 weeks. Then the judge called the sidebar and released the jury for the day, and his testimony will pick back up on Monday. And with that, day 18 is in the books, and that wraps up week 4 of this trial. And we are finally getting to the tail end of this thing. Thanks for being here. Thanks for following along. And here's the question of the day. Do you have problems like reconciling how these experts are saying totally drastically different things? One saying criminally responsible, one isn't, but they're both science. Let me know in the comments.